Hello guys and welcome to the third and final for this season video of our summer series. And this time we're going to look at something different. I hope it's interesting for all or most of you. And it's looking at draft pick success rates. I've seen similar things about the NHL draft, but I don't think we've done something for our draft. So let's let's hop into it and see what was actually done. Uh, so what I try to do and try to make it as least manual as possible with setting some parameters in the database, but basically, I ranked each draft pick in the performance of each UDL draft pick in tiers, and these tiers are as follows here, as are described here. Basically, star players, good players, okay or average players, fringe players, and non NHL. And these tiers are mostly uh, tuned to our league, so it's not about their NHL spots or NHL production. If it says fringe here, it means it's fringe for our league, and it's if it's okay or average, it's based on our league. And this is how we visualize it, or how we will most of the next graphs visualize it. And this is not only an exemplary picture, it's actually the overall result of all players. So basically these are uh, you could say percentages. So we have 8.6, I think, percent of our picks have become star players. 11% are good players. Then we have around 25 that are okay. And then these are fringe and non-NHL or busts. And combined in groups, we deem this UDL relevant. So the top three tiers are UDL relevant and the bottom two are not UDL relevant. So this here picture shows that 45% of the prospects that were ranked were UDL relevant and 55% were not. This is a bit misleading because here are the criteria that I used. So out of all draftees, 922 were ranked. So each draft pick from the 2018 draft or previous was ranked, which impacts the results in a way that some of those draft picks, especially the 2018 ones, could still develop and move up in this tier system, which would improve the results of the draft. So I think, if I remember correctly, in our league history success rate, draft pick success, we hover around 53% average, which is higher than what you see here, the 45% success rate. So this difference, I think, could be covered by those picks that develop later. So a lot of these picks that are currently in this rank in tiers 4 or 5, so fringe or non-NHL, a lot of them, or not a lot, but some of them could still move up the rank on the or the ladder. And for the most recent draft is from 2019 draft, those who um, meet the or have exceeded the prospect thresholds have been ranked in this research. So I think that should clarify the picture. And what's the point? So the point of this research, so to say, was to get an idea of each draft pick's worth. So uh, how much a single draft pick is worth depending on where in the draft it is. and also to see we delve into the difference between positions in terms of forwards, defensemen, and goalies. So looking at the bigger picture, we looked at the biggest picture. So now one level deeper. How does it look in terms of pick in rounds? So the top round, the first round is split in three parts here for the research. We have the top five selections, then the next five selections, so 6 to 10. The late first is 11 to 20. Then we have the 21 to 30 selections, so the early second round, late second round, and then the later rounds are all bundled together. So third round, fourth round, fifth round, and the 6 plus, because here fall also the initial prospect draft, which had 10 rounds. It's all the rounds are after the sixth are included here. So you see the biggest things we can notice here is how quickly the star level drops. So nearly half of the top five selections have become star players, which is naturally expected. And also the another high drop is between the picks, the top 10 picks and the later first round selections. So the difference between the top two tiers between the first 10 picks and the later first round and then second. So you see that actually the later first round picks aren't that much more valuable compared to the early seconds. For example, of course, you see the gradients, so the decrease in value, but the difference is a lot less than compared to the top 10 selections. And you see here in I think these were only two players represent these top five picks, and this is the Shipachyov, whom we talked about in the recent draft video, and the other one here is Michael Dal Colle. And you might think about Yakupov, but actually Yakupov had enough games and goals to qualify for the third tier, so the OK tier. So he was not in the bottom two tiers, which is an interesting fact. And if we simplify this bigger picture a bit, this is how it looks only looking at UDL relevant versus non-relevant in terms of percentages. So you see here what I talked about, the big difference between the top 10 selections, which produce an average of 85% UDL worthy players, and then we see a big drop to the late firsts by 20%. So the late first picks produce 65-ish percent UDL players, and then we go lower. The fourth round is something of a mystery. Why is it actually worse than the fifth and the 6 plus rounds? But I think we can basically average these and say that all of these produce around 30% of UDL, so 30% of these draft picks develop into fantasy relevant assets, which is, if I remember correctly, this is a bit better than the later rounds in the NHL drafts. But if someone can dig up such a similar research about the NHL, it would be interesting to compare, I think. So looking a bit at just deviating from the big picture to see at the teams that actually pick early in our league. And the Blazers have had the most top five selections so far up to the 2023 draft. Mighty Camels are second with 6 selections. And then we have Halifax, Sydney, and Wolfsburg with 5 selections each in the top five. And on the other end, so who has been the least? the Turtles, who are somewhat famous for their tough draft lottery luck, have had one selection in the top five, as many as have Hamilton, Montreal, and Las Vegas. But there is one team who has had none, so zero top five selections. I wouldn't have guessed it, but I guess it's kind of fitting that it's Brad. So the one guy who does prospect scouting for a living among us, or I think he's the only one. Maybe it makes sense that he doesn't get early early picks, so we keep it more challenging for him to keep the playing field level for all of us when it comes to prospect scouting and drafting. Uh, and if we look at the picture of the whole first round picks, not only the top five selections, basically most of the same teams are among the top and the bottom again. So among the bottom, I think the Scouts are a team that joins these teams with fewest first round overall selections. But surprisingly, the team that has had the most first round selections overall in the all of the first round is the Ramparts with 19. Then I think next come the Blazers. Then the some I think Halifax is next. I don't remember, but I was surprised that Quebec has had a ton of selections in the later part of the first round. So that's about the teams who has picked where. And looking at positions, so this is the standard roster composition of our active active roster, and 13 forwards, 7 defensemen, 3 goalies. Of course, it varies. Some teams use 2 goalies, but anyway, this is I think pretty standard. And compared to how we have picked so far, we can see that we have kind of over selected forwards compared to how many forwards we need for our everyday rosters, and we have under selected defensemen. The goalies are about the same percentage, so 13.5 selected compared to 13% on the active roster. And I think this is something to keep in mind when we go deeper into position success rates, because I think it works in the favor of the defenseman. And when are we picking what position? This is actually the chart that started the whole research, and the question that started the whole research was, I think it was the time of our prospect draft, that if and when do we have a wave of goalies that are selected in the draft? And you see, the answer to that question would likely be this here. This whole graph first is the 10 pick rolling average at each drafting position. So basically, this here is a rolling average of only the first overall selection, but then it develops into a 10 pick rolling average. So what it means is, or what it shows here, is that among the top selections, we have had uh, close to 8 forwards and 2 uh, defensemen, and then drops anyway. But the in the beginning it's not the most accurate, but you can see the trends, and the trends show that if you look for the goalies and the yellow line here, we have some bumps around the middle of the second round, then again against the middle of the third, middle of the fourth, and then here in this kind of early fifth is the place where we select the most goalies, and also quite a few defensemen, which you see that this is the place where, or the spot in the draft where we select the least forwards. And another thing that I think we can attribute the bad results in our fourth round selection is that we seem to over select forwards. Maybe these are some home runs, so to say, picks or boom or bust picks that are made towards the end of the fourth round, and many of them don't pan out, so they impact the stats. But otherwise, you see that you at the start of the draft we tend to select more forwards, especially more than we need on our rosters, and then it gradually declines to maybe like we see here around between 5 and 6 picks of each, if each 10 are forwards, and around 3 picks are defensemen, and slightly below 2 of each 10 picks are goalies. But still, it's an interesting towards the end of the draft. So the sixth round is usually for defensemen most, especially since the last 10 picks are slightly more uh, geared towards defensemen in terms of percentage. So looking even deeper into position, so we compare the big picture we saw on the second slide to the same picture but positionally. And these are the sample sizes. So of the overall 922 players, 570 are forwards, and these are how they are distributed in the same for the same criteria. And you see that compared to the 45% fantasy relevant players, the forwards are 41, which is slightly lower. So basically, we are worse than average in terms of drafting successful forwards or finding relevant forwards in the draft. And but value can be found even in the later rounds. This is the only star player that has been drafted out of forward past the sixth round, which was a seventh round selection in the inaugural prospect draft by Chilliwack. Pretty famous, should be. Next, we look at the defenseman, and you see here what I think is the most statistically relevant deviation, in that we have managed to draft 57% fantasy relevant defenseman compared to the 45% average, which is, like I said, quite significant. And you see the top five selection, there is not only not a single bust among these selections, but they are all good or star players. And these are the selections in the top five who were ranked. As you can see, quite an impressive group of defensemen. Basically, we well, maybe we shouldn't be so hesitant to draft defensemen early. It seems we are doing quite a good job at it. The sample sizes, of course, are small, especially for the first group, because the top five selections are the least, and also the 6 to 10 are quite small, and it will get even smaller with the goalies in a minute. But you see, what is, I think, quite astounding is that until the end of the second round, we can say that we can see that we have around 80% success in finding fantasy relevant defenseman. 80% is, I think, huge until the end of the second, and then we see a significant drop here for the third round, where it drops quite dramatically to below 50% in terms of finding fantasy relevant defenseman. I mean, if you combine the top three tiers. And the goalies, first thing notable is that there are no goalies ranked in the top five. There are two goalies drafted in the top five in the UDL, and these are Jesper Wallstedt and Askarov, but none of them have been ranked in this research since they're quite recent picks. So it's interesting to see where they will rank. And in the six to 10 picks, only two goalies managed to qualify, so to say, for this group, and these were Markstrom and John Gibson, and they both fit into the second tier. Of although Gibson is trending down over the last couple of seasons, but still his career stats are decent. And what is impressive in this chart, of course, goalies always small sample sizes, strange development curves, and everything else that is well known about the goalies. But it's still, I find fascinating that the early second picks are the best, or have developed best so far for the goalies, as you see that 40% of the goalies selected in the early second have become star goalies. And of course, this you will see now the list. They are not huge numbers here. The small sample sizes are small. These are the goalies that have been selected and ranked in the early second that have developed into the top two tiers. And there you see quite good. But this is mostly not because realistically it's easier to draft a good goalie in the early second, but because mm, people both in the NHL and in the UDL are hesitant to draft goalies too early, I think. And you see the overall success rate for the goalies is uh, similar or comparable to the forwards. So if we summarize most of the things that we noted, first, the star potential dropped significantly outside of the top five selections. These couple of conclusions are of the more obvious variety, and that the fantasy relevance drops significantly outside of the top 10. Some of the more not so obvious or not so expected uh, observations or findings that we can draw are that defensemen are quite a safe investment, especially if we look at the top rated defenseman and can use a second round selection. It's also, again pretty safe. And maybe defensemen are really easier to project. I don't know. But another somewhat surprising fact is that goalies are not harder to draft than forwards in terms of finding fantasy relevant goalies, as you saw that they have the same percent rate in terms of developing into UDL relevant assets. We suck at drafting in the fourth round. Uh, I don't find the valid reason. Maybe except the suggestion that we just have a boom or bust picks more on the fourth, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense why we have a lot of boom and bust picks in the fourth and not so many in the sixth, for example. So that's a mystery still for me. And maybe the most, I don't know, the most general and important conclusion of this is that four to six round selections have virtually the same value in terms of finding actual fantasy relevant players. Of course, the fourth round picks are always before the sixth round, so you pick ahead of other people, but basically you roll the dice the same. So take that for what it's worth in terms of evaluating picks in future trades. And also another more random conclusion is that early drafting doesn't guarantee success, since we saw that the teams that have had the most top five selections aren't exactly haven't exactly become UDL powerhouses. So it's again like in the NHL, it's a difficult and masterful job to combine good drafting with good cap management and veteran contracts and everything trades. it takes a lot of good thinking, good skill, good luck to actually build and maintain a successful team. And I think it's even, of course, it's not more difficult because we are just playing a fantasy hockey, but it still takes a very big skill set to manage a team in our league, which is which is the whole point. So thank you. I hope you find it interesting. We will be switching gears in a few days to get ready for the auction and getting ready for the new season. So I will have a bunch of stuff that we will discuss and uh, see happen over the next few days. So stay tuned for that and see you around. Bye.